Welcome, friends. Hello. I see a few familiar faces, a few new faces. It's good to see you all. Maybe you see some people in the room that you are happy to see or are seeing for the first time in a while. Just want you to know you're welcome to be on mute. You're welcome to keep your camera on or off depending on your level of eye comfort, depending on what you need, what your body needs in this moment. Take a nice deep breath as we let in a good bit of fresh air into our lungs and then let it out. And do that again. I invite you to echo after me. Spirits rising, like the sun, love within us, Holy One, spirits rising, like the wind, winds of healing, winds of change, listen now, na 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 Try that with me. Na 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 again. Na 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 na. Take a breath and echo after me. Spirits rising, like a flower, feel the warm, healing power, spirits rising, like a dove, calling freedom, friends, calling love. Sing with me now. Na 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 na, and again. Na 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 na, and again. Na 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 and last time. Na 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 na.
Thank you, Paul, for getting us in the mood and relaxing us a little bit. It's good to be in the zone. Welcome, friends. We're glad to see you again. I know for some of you it's been a long day, but I promise this will be worth your while to be refreshed and supported here in this place. We have named this the Herbster reunion, and it occurred to us, maybe some of us don't know what makes a person a Herbster. Before I let you in on that, I will say that every single person is welcome here. We do have a Herbster program that was started by Ben Moore, Herbster's wife, Elizabeth. And he had two great loves, and that was the love of his church and his wife. And he had a love for his church in the context of the reality of contemporary ministry. So they wanted to enable Eden to always keep in mind those recent graduates of the seminary. And so we've designated 5 years would be recent. But again, I see some of us are a little older. Don't worry, don't leave, stay here. The intent for the Herbster program was to recognize the need for the recent graduates to experience early in their ministry the supportive nature and nurture of the seminary community. And we do that as we re-engage with our classmates, and we have the opportunity to dialogue with the faculty about the reality of ministry. And I think that's something that we could all use right now. And so I see Deb doing this. I'd like to just turn this over real quick to Deb for some opening comments, and then we'll move right along.
Sandy, I was just saying amen. I was giving.
Oh, well, you had your hand up.
Amen. I wasn't trying to interrupt. I was just giving you the call and response. Yes, I think we can all use a space to talk about the realities and challenges of ministry in our context right now. I just want to welcome you all to this space. I'm sorry I'm late. I came over from our evening forum, which was led by Reverend Tracy Blackman, and was really a rich forum, but it was also a longer forum. And so I was coming a little late from that, and I'm very, very happy to be here and so excited that you all have the opportunity to engage with Paul Vasile, our music director, who brings so much to our community from his creativity and his passion, his vision for equipping people to sing and worship together with joy. And that comes through in our community through the leadership that he brings to worship. So thank you so much for being with us, Paul.
It's really good to be together, and I want to just say at the outset, I am really humbled and really grateful. This is the second time I have done a Herbster event. The last one was in person in 2013 or 2012, I think it was. It was the same year that I had the opportunity with Christopher Grundy, with Dr. Grundy, and with Cynthia Wilson to help lead a spring convocation. And I stayed on for an extra day to hang out with alumni, and I remember Piwa, I remember a bunch of other alum of a generation, maybe or two back, that were just engaged in working, and we had a great time together. So I trust that this is, though a modified version, will be a space to explore. And friends, the theme that I have really felt heavy in my work and on my heart in these days, and connects to this convocation's theme of resilience and prophetic ministry in the church, has to do with not joy, but actually with grief, with lament and resilience. And as I've been working online, as I've been for the last 5 years that I've been at Eden, in a community with a network of artists and healers and musicians in the church and outside the church, I want to name that powerfully, I have learned a whole lot. I have experienced a whole lot. And I want to say that part of what the Eden community has experienced is me learning as I go. That you've been noticing or watching me. Those of you in choir, those of you who have experienced worship leadership, there have been some shifts in my own ways of working and being a music leader that are connected to learnings around trauma, specifically trauma-informed leadership, and the ways that we as leaders, especially in this moment, show up for the work of ministry. What does that, or what will that, what can that look like, especially as it will be, friends, a thing that we're going to and we are going to reckon with for probably decades after this year of pandemic. We are not done with the hard conversations about grief and lament. And I wonder if you would take a moment just to take stock in yourself, just for a moment. What are you feeling? Can I ask you to just check in with yourself tonight? Just where are you at? Just what are you noticing inside of you as you maybe stop to take a breath, as you deepen in, as you just let yourself pay attention to the inside of yourself for this moment. What are you feeling? What are you noticing? Noticing anything in your body, aches or pains or tightness or constriction? Would you put it in the chat if you feel welcome, as you feel welcomed and ready? What are we bringing to this space that we want to name, that we want to bless? We want to speak aloud, if you will, in community. What are we bringing to this space? And I'm going to just sing as you type for a little bit, and you might sing with me too. You know this refrain already. Na 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 na. Thank you. Everything is a decision. What else are we feeling, friends, as we sing and share? Oh, na 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 na. Oh, na 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 na. Na 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 na. A lot of waiting, maybe feeling like we're at a tipping point, friends, feeling the separation from loved ones. Unaddressed grief and lack of closure, mixture of grief and relief is bewildering. Finishing a task, having little time before moving to the next task. I feel that, Kristen. I feel that as well. Oh, friends, maybe take whatever you're feeling, and will you invite your body or your voice or just some part of you, you can just simply hum, to sing with me. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Sing it out. Na 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 na. Thank you for your participation. Honoring one loss causes previous losses to be felt again. Thank you, Sally. Mary, not everyone reacting to the same to safety measures. We bring so much to this space. We bring our grief, our trauma. We bring our challenges. And I want to open us tonight to a space where we explore. I said we would call this talk, I think we said, what did we say, Mary? Singing grief, lament, and resilience. And I instead started to feel like what we really wanted to talk about was, I'm naming them repertoires of resilience. What are the things that we might need to be singing or inviting our communities to sing that are going to help us move through the trauma, the pain, to process or metabolize that pain well so that we can regain a sense of hopefulness, a sense of possibility in our moving forward. And I wanted to just name aloud that the word resilience, which I know we've used a lot in this convocation, is not a word that I knew. It's not a word that I really had a lot of engagement with until I started working with folks in healing communities, with therapists, with folks who are doing work around somatic or sense-based, body-based healing work. And I just want to, I'm going to share my screen. Friends, what definition of resilience? As I have seen it and experienced it in the communities that I have been part of, and pardon me real quickly because my cursor, my mouse, is not doing ever doing what I want it to do when I'm in these spaces here. Anyways, I'm going to just let it be. Resilience is the process of adapting well in face of adversity, tragedy, or high levels of stress. It's been used to mean the processes by which children, youth, and adults withstand those sorts of challenges, and also patterns of bouncing back or recovering from such conditions. I come to understand that this word came into the parlance of psychologists and researchers in the late 90s, in the early 2000s. It's not a relatively new term, but if we look at what resilience is historically, friends, we can see that it's not new. This ability of bouncing back, what are the factors of resilience through which a person can recover, family support through which a person can manage stressful event processes, and this one is the one that I'm most excited about. A sense of social connectedness through which a person feels supported and connected to the community and social environment in a stressful event. I don't know about you, but I have very few other things in my life that connect me like singing. And that I want to name singing as one of perhaps the most, I would call it, neurologically integrated activities we have. By neurologically integrated, what do I mean? I mean that the whole human person is invited to show up into that thing called singing. And I know a lot of us have baggage around singing because of trauma. Let's talk about that another time. But I want to name that we, when we sing, are connecting what? Our breath, our phonating tiny, tiny little vocal cords that are vibrating. We're making sound. Our body becomes a vibrating instrument. We are using our brain to manage words and to manage muscle patterns, even all that's happening subconsciously, and also spirit. Over and over, research is showing that singing and music making improve physical health, social and emotional health, reduce stress, provide spiritual connection and meaning. That's singing, group singing. Now, I want to be mindful. Group singing has been really hard in COVID. Actually, it's been unsafe in COVID, and that is also one of the big burdens we've had to carry, especially as practicing musicians. However, there is still benefit to humans singing by themselves. There still is both emotional, social, neurological, spiritual benefit, I believe, to singing alone. And those of you who are in my Singing as a Spiritual Practice class know that we've also modified our ways of singing together in Zoom space to actually try to feel and to work for connection with each other. I call it like queer the Zoom box to break it open and make it less boxy. But when we're able to be back together again in Sing, I also want us to notice that singing in groups amplifies and intensifies the experience and the positive experiences that we have, the positive benefits. And friends, there are marvelous studies and researchers who are working on this. So, singing, one of the best things to benefit our physical, mental, social well-being. Friends, can you think of anything better to help us cultivate resilience? That ability to bounce back, to manage stressful situations, to feel the nurture, support, and care of a community around us, to know we're not alone. That's a powerful, powerful noticing. So singing, of course, is central to our religious rituals. It's central to human societies for all of its meaning-making and community-building potential. And it's no surprise, as you can help me name, and we will in a moment, that singing and song are powerful, creative responses to trauma, tragedy, and challenge. And I'd like to offer 3 examples. And I told Dr. McCann earlier today that I might want a juicy word from him or two as we think about this, because friends, I am a practicing musician, and maybe I could call myself a practical theologian in that way, but I am no biblical scholar. I am no psalm scholar, but I follow these hunches that I sometimes get that there's something over there that I need to go sniff out, and I'll go and sniff it out. And so this is the joy. The book of Psalms, at the heart of the Bible, there is a hymnal. There is a repertoire of poetry and musical response to the range of human emotion. And those songs, those faithful songs, invite us to hear how others in the past have experienced both the absence and the presence of God, okay? It's not just all joy and hallelujahs as we're singing in this Eastertide, but we see in the Psalms a kind of a fearless approach to the shadowed dimensions of the human experience. It is not just, again, sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. God's people wandering in wilderness, derision of enemies, grief, loneliness, rage, retribution, exile from homeland, yes, and joyful praise. But let's not miss how many of these Psalms, as a book of song, a repertoire of resilience, move through pain to what? To praise. Move from roadblocks to rejoicing. Move from isolation or aloneness to a sense of community or belonging, of God with the psalmist, right? And so there's something about in our community having these words that we rehearse, right? These are not our songs. These are the songs of the Jewish people. This is a tradition of which we are grafted. So let's be clear about that. But these are words that we can use to pray when we might not have the words that we need, and that honor the complexity and the pain of our human lives past. And there's something about this, and Dr. McCann, that words of the faithful love of God. It's as if when we're singing or praying the Psalms, we are rehearsing a song about the faithful love of God, not just to us, but in ages past. And we might not feel it at this moment, but we know the song, we know how it goes, and we keep singing it until we feel it in a way. Does that make sense? There's a sense in which the act of singing or of rehearsing, or sometimes of even praying words that we believe are true, to say them again and again, to rehearse them, matters. It's the rehearsal, not the performance, that matters. Dr. McCann?
Oh, absolutely. The faithful love, some of you have heard me talk about before, is Hesed. Hesed. And it's what the psalmists celebrate when they praise in the songs of praise. The Lord is steadfastly loving and faithful. God's steadfast love endures forever, and God's faithfulness to all generations. It's what the psalmists appeal to when they pray. And as Paul has already suggested, they're actually way more actually, prayers, which are generally known, as most of you know, all of you know probably, laments, complaints, or protests. There are way more of those than there are songs of praise, but with one or maybe two exceptions, Psalm 88 and Psalm 39, the laments move toward praise. leading one of my teachers and mentors to say something that I think is the most eloquent and one of the most important insights in all of biblical commentary, certainly about Psalms commentary, is a lesson that it's hard for U.S. citizens and maybe for people in general to learn. The agony and the ecstasy belong together as the secret of our identity. That there will never be a time when things are all right with us or with the world. And if we wait to praise until things are all right, we'll never get around to it. The agony and the ecstasy belong together as a secret of our identity. And that, I think, is a key piece in helping us appreciate what resilience involves and perhaps develop a resilient lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right on target. So you said you weren't a Psalm scholar, but you obviously are.
Well, we're working on it. We spend a little time with the Book of Psalms as musicians in church. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
And Dr. Krause, I want us to just say yes. Not as cynical as fake it till you make it. No, but instead practice until you feel it. It's getting it in your bones. And those songs become songs in the night. They become the things that we can sing when we need something to call upon. When we don't have the words, those songs, those words are what allow us to pray. I want to also name that the opening song that I shared, Spirits Rising, comes out of the Hasidic Jewish tradition, which is a mystical tradition. And did you notice, friends, that there was a wordless refrain? Na, 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 sing with me, na, 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 and again, na, 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 na. Wordless, not because it's lacking meaning, but because we write our heart prayer into the song. We fuse sacred text with our own yearnings, our own needs. And there's something powerful about that when we think about lament and grief. You know, the New Testament talks about sorrows too deep or cries too deep for words, right? This sense of the soul yearning. I think there are some musical traditions that moan, that call out and cry out with the voice without words, just vocables, we call them, or syllables, monosyllabic, whatever you want to call it. There is something to the wordless song as well, and the way that that carries meaning in our life of prayer and faithfulness. And the Psalms maybe help get us there. I want to name another repertoire of resilience because it's a powerful one as we think about models, and it's African American spirituals. I had the privilege of being part of Dr. Sanders, a little bit of his class last semester where he talked about spirituals and the blues, that powerful James Cone text, which invites us to an understanding of spirituals as a repertoire of resilience and resistance. I want to name both of those, a repertoire of resilience and resistance. And he points to their imprint on Black music making, sacred and secular, and up to this very moment, contemporary musical expressions, and points out how spirituals name pain, challenge, and suffering in clear and unwavering language. That they are coupled, these spirituals, these words are coupled with melodies that can hold the weight, the emotional intensity, and the humanity that they express. And that these songs don't exist in any original form. There's not a version of a spiritual we can go back to as the Book of Psalms and say, hey, we have got the original. But instead, these are melodies that were passed down like story, generation to generation, ear to ear, heart to heart, with incredible variation. And those variations, I'll tell you, ethnomusicologists and people who study music, especially Western music, are always a little bit put off by variation. Oh, look, it changed. What's the true version? Friends, that variation is a sign of resilience. It's the thing that is able to change and still be the thing. It's a sign of creativity and strength that I think we need to notice. We don't often, I think, enough see that as a sign of strength in that repertoire in particular. But one of the most powerful things about spirituals is the fact that they hold so much of the community's language of prayer. They're multivalent and can be so easily recontextualized. They exist in multiple versions because there are different needs, there are different pains, there are different things that need to be called out or lifted up by the community each time the community gathers. And like the Psalms, spirituals are using this kind of very personal, first-person language very frequently. But Isai Barnwell, a wonderful founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, an incredible composer, says in Africana spirituality, there is a we in that me. It is both a prayer for myself and for the community that I belong to, or for which I'm part of. Finally, there's boldness, like the Psalms, one that Cohn points to, and he talks about the boldness of the spiritual, there is a balm in Gilead. Friends, in the original Hebrew text, it's not a statement, it's a question. Is there a balm in Gilead? It's kind of a rhetorical question, and the question is changed in the mouths of enslaved Black people to, there is a balm in Gilead. The song answers with assurance and confidence, not rooted in present circumstances, but rooted in God's compassion, God's affirmation of enslaved people's humanity. To me, that is a key way that spirituals lift up the humanity of those who are experiencing untold suffering and pain. Friends, a repertoire of resilience that speaks of hope, of possibility out of the rubble. That's something to notice as we think about what we might need to sing as community of faith in this time. And finally, I just want to name South African freedom songs and other forms of song that come out of places of protest and resistance. We could fold a whole lot of other repertoires of protest and resistance in here too, by the way. But the reason I want to lift up South African freedom songs are they were, at least in terms of energy, inspired by an engagement with Black music making as it found its way from the United States back to South Africa. But that this was a repertoire created and sung on the streets that shifted the spiritual power and shifted political priorities. It spoke to racism and to the identity of Black and colored people in that country with a power and with a depth that made space for political transformation. In other words, grief to joy, a sense of the turning of the tables of power, that Magnificat kind of energy. Friends, could I name also the Magnificat, Mary's song of praise, as a song of resilience? That what she is saying, in essence, in her prayer in Luke is God is the ultimate arbiter of all things. God is the one who holds the divine balances, and God will vindicate the poor. God will be the ally of the needy and of the oppressed. I think there's something about that power of these repertoires to help us, I don't know, can we say hold some dynamics of what makes for song that is resilient? What's it rooted in? How is it connected to our work together as people of faith, as leaders of faith? I want to ask you, friends, what are songs of resilience that you know? What are songs that you hear, have heard, know, sing in your communities? And I'd love, if you want to come off mute, we're a small enough group that we could speak aloud and speak into the space, but what are some songs that speak with the kind of possibility that pain could be transformed into hope?
Well, I'm so excited to see you all. Thank my sister to get the Zoom to pop back on. Minister Paul, you always just give me just so much life, just being able to hear you as a musicologist. I can't sing. That was not my blessing. God didn't give me that part. But I will say, and I kind of just share it in the chat, the course of time, from this past election season, I work in this every day, and just so much of the vitriol that was coming out. My neighbor across the street putting out a Trump flag as soon as they saw the Black family move in here. So many different little things that I found myself actually hearing the old deacons. Um, and that we as kids, growing up in the Black Baptist church, and I'm a daughter of a Black Baptist preacher, when I was growing up, we actually hated to get to church early because nobody wanted to be in the sanctuary when those deacons were on the front row and on the pews. Um, but actually, what they were doing, they were setting the atmosphere, but they were lifting up the prayers of the people, almost as you were saying, the Psalms and the psalmists were doing when we didn't have the words. We didn't know as kids what was going on, around us, but something that those older generations knew and were gifting to us, and we didn't know they were gifting us. And there were no words necessarily. No one could understand what they were saying, but they were down on their knees and they were moaning and interceding. And there was a melody, to it, and there was a cadence to it. And I found myself hearing that in my spirit during this whole election season. And hearing like Psalm 94 was one that I ate it up, and the Psalms, I'll end it with this. One of the beauties of the Psalms, and I think Clint, it's hard to call him my professor Clint, but so much, because I have lived in this since leaving seminary. I've quoted it, I've used it in protest spaces. I've used it even the night before the election as a call, we've got to do this. But it is because of this and the authenticity of the psalmist of speaking our emotions. They weren't, pretty little prayers,
Right. No. And Antona, you mentioned Dr. Watts, or singing the old hundreds, as it's sometimes called, devotion, in that Black church experience of arriving early and I love the Lord. I can't do it. I just heard people do it, and I just want to.
We were like honorary, and you would be like an honorary deacon in the Black Baptist church because that is it right there.
That's it right there. And it's Amazing Grace, Mary. Yeah, it's a piece that sort of feels rather pedestrian in some moments, but there's something about that song that awakens something in us when we might hear it or sing it with others. Do you notice there's something about that collective energy of being held or kept by something? Yeah. Any others? Just again, type them in the chat as you're thinking about other spaces. And I want to, as we do that and transition into another space, I want to invite us to sing again, but in just a moment. Any others in the chat you want to throw up there or share? Repertoires of Resilience. This is a new song that comes from a spiritual teacher that's a Jewish priestess. The world is about to turn. Clint McCann, absolutely. And Dr. Grundy, how can I keep from singing? Think about that. No storm can shake my inmost calm when to that rock I'm clinging. Since love is Lord of heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? Something allowing us to keep on singing despite. Hold to God's unchanging hand. Thank you very much, Renee. Yeah. Don't feel no ways tired when life flows on an endless song. Yeah. Thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about grief and trauma. Stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here. Stone by stone, tear by tear, we release and create right here. Stone by stone, you can sing with me, tear by tear, we release and create right here. Stone by stone, tear by tear, we check in with your body, friends, noticing any places of tension, noticing what you might be holding on to in this moment. Take in a breath and release that breath. One more time. Yeah. Indeed. Thank you very much, Antona. Let's take a little further step into how we can invite communities we're part of into this healing and mending work, into cultivating resilience. I want to ask friends, what are we mending from? What is this trauma that we're facing? You know as well as I do that this global pandemic that we're in the midst of is perhaps the great communal trauma of this moment. It has crossed boundaries of race and economic status, country and culture. I looked at the statistics yesterday, and there were a total of 2.86 million deaths around the world. And yesterday, the death toll here in this country reached 556,000 people. Regardless of privilege or social location, we all have stories about how this pandemic has affected our lives and the lives of those around us. And I can point to, as you can, and I don't want to shy away from naming death, the death of beloveds, family, friends, congregants, the long-term health consequences that we and others might be reckoning with, loss of employment, and with that loss of employment, loss of credit, and all sorts of challenges, financial hardship, social distancing, and that isolation from our support structures, psychological stress, anxiety. We are all here in this together. And I have wondered out loud, this trauma, this collective trauma which we have experienced, which has far-reaching implications, is even right now really also feels like it is exacerbated by the glimmers of hope that we get, by the sense of people being vaccinated and hope, and this sense of also that at the same time more people are getting vaccinated, there is again another rise in cases. This instability, this unsureness that we're experiencing. And we are also want to say aloud, we're feeling the effects in others and in ourselves, aren't we? We are aware of the ways that trauma shows up in our bodies. And I'm going to put into the chat that people who do work around trauma in not even in the church, but just in general spaces have a list. Has anyone in this room experienced anything on this list in the last hour, in the last day, in the last week, in the last month? That list is both sobering and disheartening and also deeply human. That these things that we see and these things that we feel and have experienced are indeed signs of trauma, which we have experienced personally and collectively. I think it's important to also notice that this trauma touches other trauma, that we aren't just the people who live in our houses and everything is fine except it's a pandemic. No, we have family trauma. We have historical trauma, which often goes unnamed, around race and culture, around our privilege, around our social status. There's a lot that we carry. And friends, it is woven together. But I want to point, just going to put some quotes up in just a moment. Yes, there is so much intersectionality and interconnectedness, interwovenness that we're noticing. But where does trauma live, friends? Where does it live? It doesn't live in our brains. It lives in our bodies. It lives in this thing which we walk around in. And I've been very deeply formed by the book My Grandmother's Hands by Resmaa Menakem, who is a healer, who is a trauma specialist in the Twin Cities area. He wrote a phenomenal book called My Grandmother's Hands, which was introduced by a friend, and it's changed my life. And I really want to offer some words that he speaks about trauma. And I want to just let those words wash over us and see what we notice together. Friends, I'm going to let this slide play. I'm going to move you all over to the side, and I'm going to reduce you all so that I can actually read the slide this time. Let's do that. The body is where we live. It's where we fear, hope, and react, where we constrict and relax. And what the body most cares about are safety and survival. When something happens to the body that is too much, too fast, too soon, it overwhelms the body and can create trauma. Contrary to what many people believe, trauma is not primarily an emotional response. Trauma always happens in the body. It is a spontaneous protective mechanism used by the body to stop or thwart further or future potential damage. Trauma is not a flaw or weakness. Can I read that again? Trauma is not a flaw or a weakness. It is a highly effective tool of safety and survival. Trauma is also not an event. Trauma is the body's protective response to an event or a series of events that it perceives as potentially dangerous. And continuing on, as a therapist, I've learned that when trauma is present, the first step in healing is almost always involves educating people on what trauma is. Trauma is all about speed and reflexivity, which is why in addressing trauma, each of us needs to work through it slowly over time. We need to understand our body's process of connection and unsettling. We need to slow ourselves down and learn to lean into uncertainty rather than away from it. And finally, we need to ground ourselves, touch the pain or discomfort inside our trauma and explore it gently. This requires building a tolerance for bodily and emotional discomfort and learning to stay present with, rather than trying to flee that discomfort. Note that it does not necessarily mean exploring, reliving, or cognitively understanding the events that created the trauma. With practice over time, this enables us to be more curious, more mindful, and less reflexive. Only then can growth and change occur. That is a lot, but it's also a profound invitation into singing. Why singing? Friends, singing is connected to that slowing down, that settling, that breathing, that opening, that expanding work that connects to the central nervous system, to the vagal nerve in particular, or what he calls the soul nerve, which is the thing that is connected, one of the oldest parts of our brain, to that fight, flight, or freeze instinct. You've all felt it, right? And it is indeed, that is when we experience an event that causes us to experience trauma. It's connected to that space in our human bodies. And that is what Resmaa Menakem and other, those who are working around in trauma-informed spaces are inviting us to connect to. And so, friends, what does it look like, or what would it avoid? We can't avoid the trauma. Dr. McCann, that quote that you said earlier, the agony and the ecstasy, all held together. In other words,
it's the secret of our identity. We can't avoid it.
Can't avoid it.
The therapist, Mary Pfeiffer, says most of the craziness in the world comes from trying to run away from pain. Most of the craziness in the world. There's a lot of truth to that.
And so here we are to embrace that process, but also, friends, to cultivate tools, spiritual practices like singing, like meditation, other forms of spiritual and emotional care that invite us to slow down, to touch base with ourselves, to tenderly, as he says, I love that, but intentionally become aware of the way our bodies are traumatized, the ways that we react to challenging and painful and difficult circumstances, friends, and to embrace a process of healing. And that is not a process that Resmaa Menakem says happens overnight. But as we talk about what the timeline of healing is for this pandemic's impact on us, as we think about those of us who have had experiences of trauma, of pain, of all kinds in our lives, what the timeline of our healing is not something I or anyone else can determine. But you can cultivate tools to help you move through. And I want to name singing as one of those tools. And I'd love to share a song that I have found to be an extraordinary gift in this work. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Those are words of Rainer Maria Rilke. Fear not the pain. Will you sing that with me? Fear not the pain. Now listen. Let its weight fall back into the earth. Let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Sing with me, breathing in deeply as you sing. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. One more time, if you hear a harmony, feel free to add it. Fear not the pain, let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. Can I ask you to just take stock of what you're feeling as you sing? What are you noticing in your body as you're engaging in that song and those words? Might you put some words in the chat if you feel inclined, and just let us know, what are you noticing in your body? What are you feeling as we're singing together, even in this Zoom space? And I'm just going to hum while you do that. You can hum with me if you like. One more time, fear not the pain. Let its weight fall back into the earth, for heavy are the mountains, heavy are the seas. We're noticing calm and release, like sitting at the sound, watching water, calm and serene, like there's a way through, feeling relieved to let go of some of the heaviness because the mountains and seas are heavier and can handle the weight, feeling at peace. Singing is one way we slow down, connect to our breath, the vibrations from our voices, and when we're able to sing together again, other voices, settle the central nervous system and invite us into spaces where we might be able to, this is Resma Medicum's word, metabolize the pain. Notice its texture and shape, break it down, and even cultivate, he even says, curiosity and tenderness in ourselves. It's a practice of noticing. May I even name it, friends, in our Christian tradition as a contemplative practice, as a way in which we stop to be in the present moment, not in the past, not in the future, but in this moment. And music's power to bring us to that present moment. There's so much right now that wants us to push forward, look ahead, return to normal. But I wonder if our work right now as leaders in the church isn't to help first ourselves slow down, settle our central nervous systems, and invite others to notice, to name, and be present to the grief, to the trauma, and challenges that we have experienced and are experiencing. As we begin to imagine even what regathering looks like, I'm worried we're going to spend a whole lot of time on the arrangement of the chairs, on air circulation systems, on CDC protocols for gathering, all important. Don't forget they're important. But do we have at hand spiritual practices and songs that help us deal with or find our way through the trauma that individuals are going to be bringing back into the spaces that they're going to be seated in? Are we ready, spiritually ready for what this moment might invite us to? Not physically ready, but spiritually ready. And I want to say that I feel in a way that I've not felt before in my own life and work, and I share this with you not out of grandiosity, I hope, which is a pandemic stress response, but out of an authentic sense of calling, that my work as a pastoral musician and worship leader might be just that, helping communities I am with to be fully present to these bodies, to name the places of tension and pain, constriction, to metabolize those songs. And then, friends, with that experience, we might be able to find some threads of hope and possibility to move forward healthfully, faithfully, not pushing through, subverting or submerging the pain. And we know what happens when we do that, right? It will just continue to fester. It will continue to live under the surface until it reveals itself in another way, activated perhaps by another trauma. Also want to notice, and Dr. Grundy, I want to thank you for your ways that you've modeled this in our life together here at Eden. I'm wondering if we're committed, friends, to weekly practices of naming things like grief in our worship. We want to come into worship. We want to have a great old time. We want to feel good. But does worship provide moments of lament? Does worship provide spaces where we can actually say, all is not well right now? Where we can name aloud and again in consistent ways. Because friends, for some of this is going to take a while. Think about therapy. When you go to the therapist and you say, I need help, you don't come at your issues head on, do you? You come at them like a circle. In my years of working in therapy, we made what felt like concentric circles. And friends, I wonder if our healing work isn't like that too. And so our liturgies and our musical forms, even circles, widening or shrinking, need to honor shapes that honor our healing processes, right? Not get it done, fix it, make it better, but gently holding, tenderly massaging and caring for the thing that aches, not simply popping a pill to feel better. Not that medication is a bad thing. Don't hear that, please, at all. But hear me inviting us to thinking about this work in holistic and even in circular ways. And so I wonder about musical forms like I've experienced or shared with you today that are circular. I wonder about refrains. I wonder about spaces in worship that hold ambiguity, that hold spaces for the community's intentions to be named as varied or as mixed as they might be. Indeed, our new president naming that ritual, thank you, another ritual which we saw, our new president who got on national television the night before the inauguration, and what did he and our vice president do? They named the grief. They lit the lamps. Moments where we don't just quickly move on, but where we sit with and live with it. And friends, that might be more than just at the moment of confession and worship. That might be prayer stations weekly, for months, or maybe even for years. That might be multi participatory ways of engaging in practices of prayer, like journaling and writing and community art projects, things that continue to live and circle around these themes of healing and resilience and possibility. I wonder, and I want to gauge the energy of this group because I know that it is late. It's later than we expected it to be at this point in the presentation, and I want to name that it's also the third day of convocation and a beautiful and joyful time. I have a few more things to share, but not a whole lot. But I wanted to invite us to break into small groups. And I wanted us to reflect a little bit in just small conversation. But friends, what are some songs or strategies for cultivating, moving through this process of naming our pain and into resilience that you might need to cultivate in your own communities? What are some ways that you can imagine engaging with these practices and themes in your own community? What might that look like for you? I could give you a list of 18 things that you might try in your congregation. I don't know your congregation, and I don't know what they need. And I will bet you that what my congregation of origin needs and what yours might be very different and contextual. And so, were we really willing to break into some groups for just a moment? Maybe have a good spirited 7-8 minutes of conversation and keep our sharing really, really crisp, and offer some ideas to each other about how we can imagine cultivating spaces for naming our grief, naming and lament, and cultivating resilience in our faith communities. Would that feel okay, everyone? And then we'll come back and we'll listen to a beautiful piece to end us out. And welcome back, friends. When you bring us out of enclosure, we will be like dreamers, our heads thrown back with laughter, our throats vibrating with song. And the others will say, yes, great things have happened to them, the ones who have struggled long with their questions. Yes, great things would have happened to us, and we would be dizzy with the joy of them, drunk on water in an arid land. Our tears, our joys seed. We'd go out weeping and come back singing, our arms full of sheaves. Friends, words from Psalm 126, that ancient psalm that says, when the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, then were we like those who dream. And that promise that those who sow with tears will reap. with joy. That yin and that yang, that agony and that ecstasy, that balance that the Psalms name. Wonder, what did you come to hear in your groups? Maybe you even put them in the chat. What ideas or thoughts do you bring back from your conversations of ideas of ways to integrate practices of lament and grief, tending, and resilience in your worship life and space? And maybe if we can be really brief, would you even maybe come off mute? It maybe be nice to just hear from us. If you want to use the chat, but if you'd like to speak into the room, please come off mute and just offer a quick little thought, please. Welcome that.
I'm a writer and a poet. This is my tool. And then I hand it to you, the musician, to make music of what I write.
Thank you. Writing and poetry as a practice for ourselves and for our congregations. Thank you. Others? I'm sure more will emerge. Is anyone familiar with Yahrzeit? It's a practice in the Jewish tradition where the year anniversary of having lost someone who you've loved. And in each liturgy, there is a moment for those who are celebrating or honoring a Yahrzeit to stand and to name, maybe not aloud, but at least to be seen. Friends, this way in which grief is an extended ritual, not something we move through quickly, not linear, but a longer space and a longer time than we might ever imagine we might need. And so as we worship and gather, just ask, are there similar ways our liturgy and our songs especially make space so that when we're back together again, we do not simply push through or manage, but we cultivate this sense together that we can speak truthfully what has shaped and is shaping our lives, even the painful places, and that our communities provide this space for personal processing, personal and communal processing of our pain in God's presence. Singing as a way of praying, of offering that heartfelt prayer and praise, that includes the ache of our hearts and our yearning for healing. And I think, friends, that it's out of that space that we find new hope, possibility might emerge, future that we couldn't have imagined when we are able to speak in love, in care with each other in community. And I want to finish with a song that just was written in the last year by a dear colleague, Mark Miller, and a poet, hymn writer, Dave Bjorlin. And the piece is called After the Flood. And I invite you to just notice, friends, what it speaks to the themes that we've lifted up tonight. I'm going to put the words in the chat, but the video that I'll share also has beautiful words and images sung by the composer. And I hope that it will, as we end tonight, be a prayer of our hearts. Lord, have mercy, in a perhaps framed or heard in a new way tonight. Here we are. This is After the Flood by Dave Bjorlin and Mark Miller.
After the flood, what can remain but shattered homes and lasting pain? The ground is wrecked by rubble and blood as wastelands widen after the flood. Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison. has come to lend a hand, and beauty blossoms out from the bud as God renews us after the flood. Kyrie eleison, Christe eleison, Kyrie
Friends, the way that prayer is held by Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, Christ have mercy, our ancient prayer of the church. Thank you so much, friends, for being here, for your presence on a later evening than maybe you anticipated, and for your participation in voice and spirit. I pray that you have the courage to hold space for the pain that you may experience and feel as a leader in this time, but also that you might help your community slow down and be present to what they might also need to metabolize, to process, and to bear in these days ahead, which, friends, we're going to be here for a while. And know that I'm here as a resource, that Dr. Grundy and all of us on the faculty are here as a resource to you in your creativity and your thinking theologically about how we worship and how we heal. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Mary, and all for the invitation to share on this tonight.